Town Hall, Ohio is a production of the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, working to forge a partnership between farmers and consumers.
Today we welcome to the program two distinguished lawmakers, Senator Keith Faber of Salina, a Republican, and Representative Jay Goyle, a Democrat. He is from Mansfield, if I'm not mistaken. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Anything noteworthy going on at the State House these days, guys? Well, see, I was going to save this juicy part of the discussion for later in the show, but Senator, since you took us there, the VLTs that Senator Faber refers to, video lottery terminals, Representative Goyle, maybe just to get us started a little bit further down this path, what's the proposal that's out there in terms of what we would be doing with these? They call them slot machines at racetracks, right?
Yeah, slot machines, video lottery terminals, whatever your preferred terminology may be. When we determined that we were going to have a $3.2 billion deficit on top of the cuts that have already been made, the governor came out with a new framework on how he was going to cut spending and how he was going to raise additional revenue in order to address that budget gap. He decided that he was going to make approximately $2.3 billion more in cuts. And then as a mechanism to fill the rest of the budget deficit, he was proposing video lottery terminals at the 7 racetracks across the state, and that would close the gap. To a large extent, we in the House have endorsed the framework with many corrections to some of the areas, such as libraries, mental health, early learning, the federally qualified health centers, and some other different areas. But, we believe that is it's a balanced budget, as we're constitutionally required to do, and have presented that scenario to the Senate. I think the Senate has had some concerns with it, and I think just yesterday, for the first time, came up with a counter proposal to that.
Yeah, and correct me, gentlemen, if I paraphrase this wrong, but in essence, the Senate's position is if you want slots at the racetracks, Mr. Governor, go ahead and do it. You don't need our approval?
Well, essentially, the Senate's position is that we don't believe that the legislature should expand gaming without a vote of the people. And that's essentially been our position. We have been consistent in that for a long time. But the real question is as you go down this discussion, is that the governor has indicated that, as he did with Keno, he has the authority to do this on his own by executive order. And certainly if he chooses to do this by executive order, we think he has that authority already under existing code and under the Ohio Constitution. If he does that, certainly the legislature probably should put in some guardrails along that process to make sure, for example, that we don't have gaming interests running amok and have corruption in Ohio. But certainly we would be willing to do those guardrails, but otherwise we think it ought to be done by a vote of the people.
Senator Keith Faber is a Republican, and Representative Jay Goyle is a Democrat, and I'm going to guess you've got a little bit different take on this whole who has the authority to do what. We're going to give you the opportunity to respond to that.
Sure. The first point that I would make on that is, it's a little bit confusing to hear the argument that the Senate doesn't support expanded gambling without a vote of the people, because just 2 years ago, the Senate majority and many of the members who are still in the Senate right now voted to expand gambling at the state's racetracks. So why they've changed their opinion from what they did 2 years ago, why they voted to expand gambling at racetracks 2 years ago without a vote of the people, but now are opposed to expanding gambling at the racetracks without a vote of the people, is a little bit confusing. In terms of the second point, the governor being able to do this under executive order without there being any sort of legislation involved, the problem with that is that it simply won't work. There have been outside groups who have said that they are going to file lawsuits, and if there is no legislation involved, it's going to strengthen the success of those lawsuits. In addition to that, the racetrack owners themselves have said that if the legislature doesn't in some way participate or in some way doesn't have vote on this in one way or another, they're not going to put up the money. So to be able to say that the governor can do this on his own and that's going to address the budget deficit, in my mind, is incorrect. It simply will not work.
But going back to your original question on VLT, let's make sure we're clear on something. Just last November, the voters for the fourth time said, we don't like the idea of expanded gaming. And so the Senate pretty much has gotten the message that if you're going to expand gaming, you need to do it by vote of the people. And, it's amazing to me that the governor, who had been steadfastly against increasing gaming, just comes out literally the day after he says, I'll veto any proposal with gaming, and says VLTs are a great idea. And then he adopts a policy that makes 7 track owners around Ohio, without without a vote of the people and without auctioning the license, having multi-million-dollar franchises automatically. And then we hear that the money may not even be available during the first year of the biennium as we go through and find out the facts of the governor's plan or the facts of the House plan, depending on which version we're seeing and which piece of paper we're seeing. That has a clawback provision, that the licensees, if the ballot initiative that's already going to be on the ballot in November with regard to 4 casinos around the state pass, the track owners may not even have to pay for their VLT license because there's a clawback provision that means they get the money back. And so that puts $455 million in the governor's plan in jeopardy. So to say that the House plan and the governor's plan on VLTs works and generates revenue is a little bit illusory. And then to say that we can't do it by a vote of the people because, well, we may not get the money as fast is already ignoring the fact that the governor and the House plan is subject to a vote of the people. So when you look at this, I think the proper way to do it is to ask the people yes or no. Do you support expanding gaming at the tracks? And if you do, shouldn't we auction the licenses off to get the highest, best bid for those licenses?
Senator Keith Faber of Salina, Representative Jay Goyle of Mansfield, you've both been very generous with your time. Appreciate you being here, and we thank all of you for listening in.